Welcome, Bert. So just to let you know that we are now live. So the session is being recorded. So if you'd like to share your screen, and we can test that it's working and the functionality is there, and I'll make a formal introduction.
Just 1 second. Good morning, Mark. How is that?
So I can see
do
the
you see one
presentation.
slide or do you see two?
I can see one slide, but it's not in presentation mode.
Okay. Let's do this different. Still no presentation mode?
No, not yet.
Okay, that's weird. It's presentation mode here, but somehow. Okay, let me do this different.
I'll go ask my colleagues to grab some support.
We can do it this way. Is this good enough to see?
I can see everything perfectly fine. Yeah. Do you want to just advance the slides and just make sure it goes through? Yeah. So I can see that. So the slides are advancing. Okay.
That works. Okay. So let's do it this way. Somehow presentation mode interferes with the streaming. So let's do it this way.
No problem. So to formally introduce the session, so the first session of the day and for the conference, we'll focus on need to know versus nice to know, defining IoT use cases to allow for successful user outcomes. And our presenter is Bert Hartog, Research and Development Operations Senior Director, the Janssen Pharmaceutical Companies of Johnson & Johnson. So I'll hand over to you now, Bert.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for providing the opportunity to talk about this. This is a topic very close to my heart. I've spent the last few years working on digital health solutions, specific in a clinical research setting. How do we get the right solution in the hands of the clinical development teams? How do we make sure that the data generated by these solutions is going to be acceptable for regulatory review, for ultimately feeding into label claims? So it's a great opportunity to talk about some of the nuance, the need to know, the nice to know in these IoT use cases, and how we're organized. Very happy to share with the audience. I'd like to encourage you all to ask questions using the discuss or the Q&A. Engage during the presentation. We'll try to answer as many as possible. If time permitting, we need to leave some questions. We'll follow up after. So some of you might be aware of this already. There's a lot of tailwind for digital health solutions, for IoT-enabled solutions. Digital endpoints is one example. The Digital Medicine Society has been collecting data on use of endpoints. Data from last fall indicates 69 sponsors have collected digital endpoints. You see many companies, maybe even represented today. You see 225 unique endpoints in the detail on the right hand of the slide. So this speaks to the very broad interest in digital endpoints. It also speaks to the very high number of unique endpoints. That is fantastic for people interested in using this type of technology. But there is a little bit of detail hidden in here that we need to really start thinking about. And that is many of these endpoints, unique in and of itself, aim to measure similar things. For example, when you look in the detail, there are dozens of endpoints related to sleep. Question is, how many endpoints do we need to measure sleep as it concerns patients, as it concerns people healthy at risk of falling ill or people recovered from illness, as it concerns clinicians and scientists for decision making? Do we need that many different ways to measure something that physiologically may be very similar? So there's something to think about. There's something else to think about, and that is that these digital measures are not at all fail-proof. You may have seen the example from last summer where FDA rejected an application from Verily for a smartwatch-based assessment using finger tapping in the context of Parkinson's disease. The rejection was nothing to do with the functioning of the watch, the performance of the algorithm. The rejection was entirely based on meaningful change in patient function. In other words, how relevant was this measure in the context of patients suffering from an identified disease? So there's more to these measurement solutions than just the performance and the validation. There's also the relevance for patients in particular and for decision makers, clinicians, scientists as well. When you start thinking about how can we make sure that these measures are relevant, there is a very robust publication from 2020 that speaks to a framework to guide the selection and development of digital measures of health. If you haven't seen this, please look up a copy and read through. It is extremely relevant, very accessible, and a fantastic foundation for making sure you select the measures that are right for your purpose. I'll come back to this in a moment. What I would like to dwell on a little bit first is how we as a company go about patient-facing technology in general, but also very relevant for these IoT-enabled solutions. It's a little bit, when you look at the priorities we place on different items, it's a little bit like a pyramid. At the bottom, you see data ethics, data privacy, data security. Irrespective of use case, irrespective of deployment, certain patients, certain geographies, when the ethics, the privacy, the security are not right, you're dead in the water. Your measurement can never be used. You have to make sure that the way data is generated is ethical in the context of use and can withstand any scrutiny on why and how and for what purpose. Data privacy, data security, some of this is actually written in law, some of this is good practice, some of this is just smart to make sure that your data is secure, cannot be misused or misinterpreted. So the foundation is about ethics, privacy, security, understanding the risk, understanding what processes you have in place to mitigate that risk, and also what governance, what oversight are you providing to pick up on any issues that may occur during use of technology. Up from there, what's very important is patient burden. Can patients actually use the technology? Do they like using it? Is it difficult to use? Is it easy to use? Do they know what to do when the technology fails? The user experience is often overlooked in these IoT solutions. And without a good user experience, you are not going to be able to generate the data that you're interested in. People may start, but they may give up if the user experience is not optimal. So patient burden is very, very important. Third one, as the pyramid starts narrowing, these are equally important, but a little bit more focused, is data utility. That is one that I don't hear very often in discussions on use of IoT-enabled solutions and digital measurements. Data utility is about, can we actually use the data? Does the data help us answer the research questions? It's not so much about, can we generate as much data as possible? It's about what data do you need specifically for your research questions? And can the technology help you generate that exact data you need for your questions? And then at the very top is the long-term utilization. When you do a first deployment of a certain IoT-enabled solution in a certain context, that is often the beginning of further use. When you use in a clinical development context, you may start in a small scale trial to see if the technology works, if it helps you answer your question. But if at that point you already don't think about the future, your phase 2B, your phase 3, your international programs, even beyond marketing authorization, going into a real world setting, supporting a commercially available product, you may find that there are hurdles that you cannot overcome. Some technologies scale better than others. So we need to think about long-term utilization right at the beginning of first use of technology. The way we go about this is that we follow an iterative process. We typically look at demonstrating value first. Can we test and iterate on novel concepts, novel technologies, novel use of technology to see how value presents coming from that technology, from the use of that technology? If value is attractive, we go through a stage gate into a scaling phase. Scaling is about, can we replicate value? Can we create a business case based on robust generation of value? Can we replicate across geographies? Can we replicate across perhaps different types of patients? With successful scaling, we go through a third, we go into a third dimension, which is about embedding. And embedding speaks to the long-term utilization. Embedding is where we look at, can we create services to deliver capabilities that allow repeat use of that technology, sustainable use of that technology, sourcing the technology, supporting the technology, making sure that the data generated by the technology can be used at scale as part of the business processes where we would like to see it used. So a number of iterative steps with stage gates in between to really control what value can be generated with this technology. Is that the value we find attractive? Is there a business case for cost-effective, repeatable creation of that value? And can we design a service to make routine use of that new technology? Very structured, which we've learned helps make good use of technology. Going back to that publication I showed a couple slides back, this is about meaningful measures for patients, meaningful use of technologies for patients. And it's another kind of layered framework where at the very top, you see a meaningful aspect of health needs to be very clear. A patient with a certain condition, what is the meaningful aspect of health patients actually care about, talk about, complain about? What is it patients find frustrating resulting from their disease? What is it you would like to see affected by treatment to allow patients to live a more satisfying life, to improve their quality of life? At the very top, that needs to be very clear in the context of the solution you're looking for. And I'll give you an example for a specific disease in a moment. With the meaningful aspect of health identified, you can look at a concept of interest. What is it? What are the symptoms that most impact the ability to undertake that meaningful aspect of health? What is the specific component in that meaningful aspect of health you would like to see affected by the treatment solution? So more refined within the meaningful aspect of health. And then there's an outcome to be measured. What measurement actually tells you change in that concept of interest, part of that meaningful aspect of health? So that gets you to your application of technology. And when it is about clinical research, gets you to your endpoint, where you can define what is the change you would like to see happen to actually demonstrate that treatment is successful or failing if that change cannot be made. So this is a very, again, very structured way to get to a specific definition of the use case for your technology. What we've done is we've developed a framework which we refer to as a digital endpoints ecosystem and protocols, where we define measurement solutions as composite solutions, or stacks, as we call them. And stacks look like this. So this is also an example, very specific disease, atopic dermatitis, where the condition is atopic dermatitis, a patient suffering from a disease, where patients may talk about how they are feeling tired, how they are feeling they cannot concentrate during the day, and how they may even be afraid of losing their job because of performance issues during the day resulting from their disease. So this condition, atopic dermatitis, may present very many meaningful aspects of health. There may be skin itching. There may be changes in skin texture. There may be changes in skin color, skin appearance, skin condition even. There may be something about wound status, and so on and so forth. You see, when you start dissecting the condition in light of how patients experience living with the disease, there are many different meaningful aspects of health. To get to a use case for technology, you need to go a little bit further, and you need to select one or multiple of these meaningful aspects of health, and then look at what is the concept of interest you would like to see measured. So, for example, the skin itching meaningful aspect of health in atopic dermatitis may bring a number of concepts of interest. Scratch composite measures. Can we do movement of limbs to measure how somebody may be scratching their skin? Can we measure total sleep time? Can we measure waking after sleep onset? Can we measure sleep efficiency? Can we measure scratching events per hour? You see many different concepts of interest. You can measure relevant to the meaningful aspect of health you're interested in, part of the condition you are developing solutions for. So this combination, when you put it in a database, allows you to very specifically select the setup of components that you would like to see part of your measurement solution. It's a little bit fine print, but it's the tree structure that really matters here. So on the left, you see a condition, atopic dermatitis, which branches out into different meaningful aspects of health, into different concepts of interest, which allows different technology solution profiles to be developed. So in the example of skin itching, let's say you want to measure a scratch composite measure, then you can do different types of, you can use different types of technology. You can use radio frequency enabled measurements. You can use actigraphy. You can use multiple sensor devices. You can use infrared based technologies, and so on and so forth. These technologies, once selected, combined with the concept of interest, the meaningful aspect of health for that condition, allow you to define very specifically the digital measurement solution you want to use for your specific use case. And that way you can present, I've got a condition I'm studying, there's a definition, meaningful aspect of health, concept of interest, that requires instrumentation and requires evidence to show that the setup is analytically validated and clinically validated. And that's where it gets really interesting, because this is where you can start aligning with others. The definition of meaningful aspect of health and concept of interest, that is not something we as industry sponsors or other drivers of research should compete on. That is one where we need to find alignment with the field. We need to make sure patients agree that this combination of meaningful aspect of health and concept of interest is actually relevant for the condition you're interested in. If patients and clinicians and scientists don't agree, then your measurement may not be the right one. So you need alignment on the definition. You also need alignment on the evidence, the analytical validation to demonstrate that technology performs as expected, the clinical validation to show that you generate relevant insights into the disease status, the evolution thereof, the response to treatment. Stakeholders in the ecosystem need to agree that this is actually worthwhile and useful and meaningful. And that's also where you don't want to compete. Where you do want diversity, which is actually a very helpful thing, is on the instrumentation layer. You may choose different sensors, different algorithms, different data, as long as they are analytically, clinically validated. Variation in instrumentation is good, if for no other reason than user experience, where some users prefer certain technology over others. You may want to measure with more friction or lower friction based on the disease state. Patients who are bedridden with the same disease as patients who are more mobile may allow a different type of technology solution, and so on and so forth. So instrumentation is one where diversity is very helpful. Now, when you start thinking about efficiencies in industry, the framework we've generated is one where we are building a catalog of reusable components, different disease-specific measurement concepts and assets related to the digital measurement solutions for those measurement concepts. What are the different technologies and what are they used for? What are the different concepts of interest that relate to a certain disease? What are the different pieces of evidence for the different measurement solutions? That database, which is in the process of building up, allows you to start plugging and playing with individual components. So when you think about developing a new measure where you need a definition, you need to agree on instrumentation, you need the evidence, that all needs to be developed. And if not available, you need to start from pretty much scratch to develop. But once components are available, they can be repurposed. The same meaningful aspect of health may be used for a different concept of interest. The same instrumentation may be used for a different condition. The same analytical evidence on a certain technology may be used for a different context. There's a lot of opportunity to plug and play individual components into different digital measurement solutions to bring efficiency into the ecosystem. And that's exactly the thinking to build up this database environment where the concept of a stack with a number of components together forming a solution allows for this type of efficiency gain in our industry. There's one other piece I would like to touch on, and that is the life cycle management of these IoT-enabled solutions. You're all familiar with this development timeline where it can take many, many years to take a molecule from preclinical development through registration into the market. That is very well understood, and there's a lot of people working on bringing efficiencies into that process. What I'm going to combine here is the lifecycle management of technology solutions. What you see, and the visual is a little bit vague on purpose, but what it illustrates is a timeline from the early 2000s up to today, early 2000 on the left, today on the right-hand side. And this is the iPhone different models that have been brought to market. What you see is the very early versions on the top left, and what you see is the current versions just about enter to market or still around. And what it illustrates is that many of these historical versions have become redundant. They are no longer available in many cases. They are no longer usable in many cases because of developments in the operating system, because of other technology evolution components. And what we need to realize is when you start developing an IoT-enabled solution in the context of clinical development, by the time your clinical development program is over, many years will have passed. And that technology-enabled solution is not one that you can still source. The technology will have moved on. The hardware will have gone through several upgrades. The operating system will have been upgraded, and so on and so forth. So somehow we need to think about how can we maintain the technology in a way that allows continued use in your clinical development program, so you can actually compare the data from your later stage trials with your earlier stage trials, even though the technology have moved on. That's where you need some kind of lifecycle management program to show equivalency between versions of technology, versions of measurement solutions to enable this longitudinal view on data generated by the different versions of the technology. Something I wanted to leave with you. The way we incorporate this in the ecosystem we're building is through services. This is a busy slide, but the asset catalogs I talked about earlier, combined with a platform for collaborating on creating solutions and a series of services, that is where, as a sponsor company, you could go to find the services for example, lifecycle management of your technology solutions, or different type services that perhaps you don't want to specialize in yourself because it's not your core business, but you do need in order to develop, use, and maintain these IoT-enabled measurement solutions, part of your incorporated in your drug development programs. So we're thinking about a very comprehensive environment where all the different stakeholders, farm sponsor, technology providers, other stakeholders can come together to collaborate on these definitions, on the evidence generation, on services related to the technology adoption and continued use to really bring efficiency into the environment and allow the benefits and the opportunity provided through these IoT-enabled solutions in the hands of everyone interested, and ultimately for patients to make sure that the items they really care about can be measured. So in closing, a couple of concluding remarks, and then I'm very much looking forward to hear from you how this resonates and what questions it may provoke. First of all, I think there's really no debate. Technology, connected technologies hold tremendous potential for patient-centric measurement solutions, for real-world application, and so on and so forth. That is crystal clear. And that is why at the very beginning, I could show so many companies are working on so many digital measurement solutions, which really speaks for the promise these technologies hold. When using the technology, a couple of factors come into play. And that's why I showed the pyramid we use on the Janssen side. There's other ways of organizing yourself, but it's really about understanding the usability of the technology. Do people like using it? Are they willing to continue to use it? The sensitivity, is it picking up on the relevant changes that you want to measure? It's the utility. Can we actually use the data to answer our research questions? All of these are critical. It's critical for acceptance of the technology, adoption of the technology. But in addition, the long-term sustainability of technology use is one that deserves a lot more attention than often seems to be the case. Lifecycle management, I spoke about. When you start using technology in the context of clinical research, you have to think long-term. Can I do the next trial? Can I go into the next stage of my development program with the same technology? And what about post-marketing authorization? Can I continue offer similar solutions to people interested in measuring these aspects of their condition that they care about? And then finally, I spoke about an ecosystem where we can bring efficiencies into this domain by repurposing assets and components of solutions, by reusing and collaborating on developing new ones, and really compete on the molecule and collaborate on the digital measurement solutions. So let me pause there and hand it back to Mark or Emily to facilitate the Q&A session.
Hi, Bert. Can you hear me?
Hey, Mark.
Hey, thank you very much for the presentation. Very good, very interesting. Just for the purpose of the audience, so we do have time for Q&A. So I've already suggested if you drop your questions in the Q&A box. So if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, there are several tabs, one cleverly titled Q&A. If you just drop your questions in there, then we can read through the question, pick them, and then hopefully Bert will be able to answer them. So would you like me to read them out for you, Bert?
Yeah, I've got them on my screen. So let me read them out and then just type from the top and see how far we get. So first question I see is from Marie asking about digital therapeutics. We need data to implement an efficient algorithm. Can we collect data during clinical trials, or do we need to have data before in order to have efficient algorithms? That's a very, very important question. It's one that has come up before. And my answer is yes, you can collect data during clinical trials, but you need to be very clear on the purpose of generating that data in your trial. And one way that we have used and worked for us is to define an exploratory objective in your clinical trial, which justifies the use of certain technology for exactly this purpose, collecting data to develop an algorithm. With the data collected, the algorithm created, tested, validated, in your next trial, you can start using the algorithm in support of study endpoints, provided it's all sufficiently supported by evidence. So as long as you don't try to combine study endpoints with exploratory data, which doesn't really work, and you spread it out over the development program, you can generate data in your clinical trial, which gives you the advantage of a controlled environment. So the data will be more robust than collected outside a clinical trial. Very good question. Next question I see from Fadi. In an ideal scenario, how do you see the DEEP platform evolving in 2022? Thank you, Fadi, for that question. That suggests that you know a little bit more about the DEEP platform, which I happen to know you do, because we've talked about this before. So the concept of a digital measurement solution as a stack, the concept of a database with assets that can be found, retrieved for reuse, for repurposing, the concept of collaborating on developing some of these components or entire solutions, the concept of a platform where you find services for getting some of the work done you need in order to manage and maintain these solutions. All of that is discussed in an industry setting as a solution that we would like to bring into the field over the course of 2022 to become available for people interested in providing services through their platform or utilizing these same services. So plan is between now and summer to start making this available and then allow the platform to evolve in light of experiences. What do people find most important, most relevant? Is it more upstream in defining the potential measures based on condition, meaningful aspect of health, concept of interest? Is it a selection of the technology? Is it a generation of evidence? Is it a life cycle management? So we'll see based on real use how we will evolve and what part will evolve fastest. But the intention is to start offering this in coming months, and 22 will be the year where we hopefully can transition the industry in becoming in being able to make use of this ecosystem we're building. Then I'm looking at Mark. Can we do one more question? I can't hear you, Mark.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Are you hanging on the platform for a short while?
Yeah, I can hang on for a bit longer to fill these other questions. No problem.
Perfect. So there is a way to. I mean, if you drop onto one of the in the lounge area, drop onto one of the tables for the people that have those questions. You can go get a direct response and speak to Bert directly. I'm very sorry. I obviously got a very tight schedule today. As much as I'd love to hear more from Bert, we have to be fair to all the other presenters. So. On that note, I will say thank you very much once again. Fantastic presentation. Really appreciate you sharing your insights. Actually, 2 days in a row. Once again, thank you for the insights yesterday at the DTX event. Thank you very much for today, and looking forward to hearing from you again in the future. Take care.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Likewise. Take care.